What if everything you've been told about focus is exactly what's keeping you distracted? Think about that for a second. You've been told to try harder, to use apps that block other apps, to wake up earlier, to meditate for 5 minutes, to put your phone in another room. And yet, here you are, still pulled in 17 directions before 9 a.m., still finishing the day wondering where the hours went, still feeling like you're running on a treadmill that someone else controls. Here's what nobody is saying out loud: distraction is not a bad habit. It is not a weakness of character. It is not something you can fix with a productivity hack or a new morning routine. Distraction is a war. And right now, you are losing it. I want you to imagine a man named Daniel, 34 years old, sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who has read every book about discipline and focus. He sets his alarm for 5:30 a.m. He journals. He has a to-do list with color-coded priorities. And every single day, by mid-morning, he's deep in a rabbit hole. A comment thread, a recommendation algorithm, a string of videos that started with something related to his work and ended somewhere he doesn't even remember going. By evening, Daniel feels that specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with physical effort. It's the exhaustion of a mind that worked hard and produced almost nothing. He's tired, but not rested, busy, but not accomplished, connected, but profoundly alone in his own thoughts. Daniel is not lazy. Daniel is captured. And if you're honest with yourself, there are days when you recognize Daniel in the mirror. The philosopher William James, writing at the end of the 19th century, said something that was prophetic without even knowing it. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. He wasn't talking about smartphones. He was talking about the fundamental human capacity that separates those who shape their lives from those who are shaped by them. Nearly 150 years later, we are living in an era that has turned the destruction of that capacity into a trillion-dollar industry. The Stoics understood something deeper still. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and practitioner of Stoic philosophy, wrote in his private journal, a journal never meant to be published, that the quality of your life is determined by what you choose to give your attention to, not your intelligence, not your resources, not your connections, your attention, because attention is not just focus. Attention is identity. What you repeatedly attend to is what you become. So here is the question that should be making you uncomfortable right now. What have you been becoming? This is where most conversations about distraction end. They diagnose the problem, they sell you the solution, usually something you can download, and they send you on your way. But that is not what this is. Because the real problem isn't the notification. The real problem isn't even the algorithm, as sophisticated and predatory as it is. The real problem is something older, something that lives inside you, something the algorithm simply learned to exploit. I call it the fractured will. The fractured will is the state of a mind that has been trained slowly, systematically over years to resist its own intentions. It is not weakness, it is conditioning. Every time you picked up your phone in a moment of silence, your brain recorded that silence as discomfort and stimulation as relief. Every time you switched tasks before finishing one, your nervous system learned that completion is less rewarding than novelty. Every time you allowed an interruption to feel more urgent than your own priorities, you wrote a new rule in your internal operating system. Other people's urgency matters more than your own vision. And now, even when you sit down with the best intentions, with the clearest goals, your own mind betrays you, not because you are weak, because you have been trained. The Roman general and strategist Sun Tzu, or rather the Chinese military philosopher Sun Tzu, whose work influenced Roman and European military thinking for centuries, wrote that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The platforms that sell your attention don't fight you. They don't argue with you. They simply make it easier to drift than to stay. And drifting, done. Consistently enough, destroys empires. It destroys relationships. It destroys the specific version of yourself you were supposed to become. Now, here is the first layer of the solution, and it is not what you expect. You do not fight distraction with more willpower. You restructure the environment in which your will operates. Think of it like a battle formation, a general who sends his troops into a swamp because he trusts their discipline alone is a fool. A great general chooses the terrain. He creates conditions in which his soldiers' natural strengths are amplified and the enemy's advantages are neutralized. Your mind is the army. Your environment is the terrain. And right now, the terrain is designed by someone who profits from your defeat. The first principle is this: friction is a weapon. Every second of delay between an impulse and its fulfillment is a second in which reason can intervene. This is why the most effective move is not willpower, it's architecture. Move the apps. Turn off the notifications. Not because you can't handle them, but because you are choosing the battlefield. Every unnecessary shortcut you remove from your environment is a wall you've built around your sovereign attention. The second principle: protect the first hour like a king protects his treasury. The research on this is unambiguous. The first 90 minutes after waking are neurologically distinct. Cortisol is elevated. The prefrontal cortex is primed, and the mind is capable of its most complex, creative, and decisive thinking before it has been polluted by the noise of the world. What do most people do with this window? They hand it to strangers. They open their phone and immediately begin processing other people's content, other people's urgency, other people's reality. They start the day as a passenger, and they never fully recover the driver's seat. The third principle, and this is where it gets psychologically deep: learn to sit in discomfort without reaching for an exit. Distraction is, at its core, an escape. Every time you reach for stimulation, you are running from something: boredom, anxiety, a thought you don't want to face, a feeling you haven't processed. The Stoics called this the practice of negative visualization, deliberately confronting discomfort to reduce its power over you. In modern terms, it looks like this. When the impulse to escape arrives, sit with it for 60 seconds. Name it, feel it, don't judge it. Then decide, consciously, with agency, whether you will act on it. Over time, this rewires the circuit. The discomfort loses its tyranny. You stop being a slave to your own impulses. The fourth principle is one that almost nobody talks about. Singular purpose is a force multiplier. The research on multitasking is settled. It does not exist. What exists is task switching, and every switch carries a cognitive cost known as the attention residue. Part of your brain stays behind at the previous task, even as you move to the next one. Which means that a person who works on one thing deeply for 2 hours is not just twice as productive as someone who switches every 15 minutes. They may be 5 or 10 times more productive because their full cognitive capacity is actually present for the work. Musashi, the legendary Japanese swordsman who never lost a single duel, wrote in the Book of Five Rings that the way of the warrior is to train until there is no separation between the warrior and the sword. One thing, complete presence, total commitment. That is not a philosophy for samurai alone. That is the architecture of mastery. The fifth principle is the most confronting. You must want something more than you want escape. This is where honesty becomes ruthless, because if you've been living in a state of chronic distraction, part of you, a very real, very human part of you, prefers it. The distraction protects you from the silence in which your deeper questions live. It protects you from the confrontation with your unlived potential. It protects you from asking whether the life you are building is actually the life you want. Distraction is comfortable. Presence is terrifying. And that is exactly why presence is the price of everything worth having. Now let me ask you something directly, and I want you to really sit with this before you answer. If your attention were a currency, and it is, how would you describe your net worth right now? Are you investing it in what matters most? Or are you spending it day after day on things that someone else decided were important? Because here is the cost of doing nothing. Here is the price of staying comfortable. 5 years from now, the project you never started will not exist. The relationship you never deepened will have drifted. The version of yourself that you saw clearly at 22 or 30 or 45, the one with specific dreams and specific gifts, that version will be harder to access. Not impossible, but harder. Because attention, like muscle, either grows or atrophies, and a life lived on autopilot is not a neutral life. It is a life quietly traded away, one distracted hour at a time. The people who change the world, and I am not talking about the Instagram version of success, I'm talking about real, lasting, meaningful impact. They were not superhuman. They were not born with more hours. They were not immune to distraction. What they had was a practiced ability to return, to come back to what mattered, to treat their attention as something sacred and their focus as something worth defending. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the most powerful empires in human history while writing private meditations, reminding himself to return, to focus, to not be swept away. If the Emperor of Rome needed to practice this daily, what makes you think you are exempt? This is the moment, not tomorrow, not after the next productivity course. Now. Because every great transformation begins with a single act of reclamation, the moment. You look at your scattered attention and say, "This is mine. I'm taking it back." Your mind is the most powerful instrument you will ever own. And right now, someone else is playing it. What will you do about that? If this landed somewhere real in you, I want you to do one thing. Go to the comments and write the word sovereign. Not for the algorithm. Not for engagement, but as a declaration, as a statement to yourself and to everyone watching that you are choosing to reclaim your own attention. Starting right now, that one word carries more weight than you know. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of power, identity, and transformation, subscribe to this channel, because this is not a place for surface-level advice. This is where the real work happens. You have been distracted long enough. The question is not whether you can focus. The question is whether you are willing to fight for the life that your focus would build. That question does not expire, but your time does.